Call to order the special city council meeting for Wednesday, August 24th, 2022. Let's call the roll.
Evans? Here. Janser?
Here.
Olson? Here. Pittner?
Here.
Padragula? Ross?
Here.
Striley?
Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to the reason for the special meeting. Got a little statement that I'll start the meeting off, hopefully lay some ground rules. This special meeting was called to work through some questions and seek out clarification on our 2023 budget. This meeting was called at the request of the City Council to meet with our department heads to keep this process moving forward. What are my expectations? The council will ask questions of the department heads in attendance. The questions are to seek information, clarification, and department head point of view. The discussion will be respectful, non-confrontational. The discussion will help set the table and prepare for the process for the 2024 budget process. What it will not be this afternoon, it will not be a line-by-line dissection of the budget. It will not be a time for grandstanding or lengthy speeches. We must all remember the final product is providing the most effective, cost-effective service to the residents of Minot. As department heads, you've been tasked with creating the most cost-effective budget that ensures the safety and well-being of your teams. As council members, we are tasked with being good stewards of the citizens' dollars. We all have the same goals for the city. Tonight is an opportunity for all of us to shine and work together for a final budget to present to the citizens. With that, we'll take each budget individually, ask for questions, and move on to the next budget. So moving forward, any questions on the city council budget? If not, we'll move on to the city manager's budget. Any questions for clarification? City manager's budget. Moving on, human resources.
Mr. Mayor,
Osco.
on the human resources budget, just because it ties into the benefits, it's my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the health plan has not been bid since 2002, so 20 years. It's been with Blue Cross the entire time. Obviously, for the 2023 budgets, unlikely any substantive changes can be made to that. But I think it's essential that that's bid. Like, how have we? It has to be bid at least every couple years. Blue Cross. I mean, there's Cigna, there's Sanford, there's many other providers. So I think that's just prudent that that's done. I think there should be an analysis done against North Dakota PERS, which the city could join, just like a lot of other cities do, and also which is done in a lot of other private and public sector. There's a high deductible at the state as well. There's an option for that. So I think that should be certainly presented, well thought out for the 2024 budget. You could actually do it in this one, I think. The window's tight, but it doesn't seem to be the maybe the will or the timing to complete that. But to me, these are just like essential pieces to the budgeting process. It should be done every year. So I would hope that that is done during the next 6 months to a year in preparation for the 2024 budget.
Thank you, Ralco. I don't believe there was a question there, so I'm not sure. Go ahead, Harold.
And I don't disagree with Alderman Striley. There are some things to look at. I think the unique situation here for the city of Minot is that we're in a grandfathered plan with Blue Cross Blue Shield. So, but that doesn't preclude us from going out and looking at other options and alternatives. And staff has already begun the process of doing that. Our HR director, Mrs. Junt, is already is going through an RFP process to secure a consultant to help us look through this. We do want to do this, and we want to make sure that we're communicating with our staff of what the potential impacts will be with all the different options through this process. So I definitely appreciate and respect that maybe this fiscal year isn't the right time to do it, but here over the next 12 months, we need to do a comprehensive look at the health insurance and if there's any ways to make that more financially sustainable to the organization for the future. So,
Thank you, Harold. Any other questions? Okay. Moving on to the city attorney's budget. Any questions?
I guess, Mr. Mayor, my only question on this is, and what is the workload? Do we need 3 attorneys in that office? What's it look like now versus what we think it's in? Obviously, there's been some heavy litigation cases over the last couple of years. I mean, is it essential that there's 3 attorneys in there for the workload?
So I've discussed this pretty at length with Kelly Hendershot, our former city attorney. When last year we went from a contract position to adding another full-time attorney there to handle municipal court load. Yeah, I mean, they're really pressed. You know, we have municipal court 4 days a week and doing all of that. You know, helping all of us. I think, you know, one of my goals, hopefully with the new city attorney, is to have them more involved in reviewing stuff on the agenda and signing off on the legality of that. So I think, like, they always have a huge list of tasks on their dream list to do. You know, there's always rewriting of ordinances, cleaning up of things, legislative season, and yeah, we do have outside attorneys for some of our litigation, but you know, our city staff attorneys have to be the conduit between those folks and all of us. So, you know, I am 100%, you know, convinced that that is. And I think it's going to be even harder now that we're going to have 2 full-time attorneys and then a part-time contract when whoever the new city attorney is comes in. There's going to be some backlog on just some run-of-the-mill stuff. So, yeah, it's something like you know, just being a lawyer, I watch myself, and I think, you know, it's staffed adequately. I mean, I think we could, you know, even add some law clerks in there to help, but, you know, this is what it is. So, and we probably will have some savings if we don't, depending upon, well, 2022 we'll have some savings, right? Because our part-time contract with Ms. Hendershot isn't going to be equal to her full-time salaried position that she left. So that's all I got, Roscoe. Is that? I mean, Harold, I don't know if you have a different opinion.
no, I don't disagree with Alderwoman Evans. There's a significant amount of work. You know, to be honest with you, this is the first community I've worked in where we've actually had the city attorney on staff. Everywhere else I've been, it's contracted out. But also working in those other communities, I've also had to approve paying the bills for that contract with the attorney because you're billed by the hour. And I do believe that in this scenario, it's much more cost effective to have them on staff. We are, you know, Kelly Hendershot and I were working with the other department heads, trying to come up with more definitive processes as far as contract review and making sure that more is going through the attorney's office more consistently, trying to balance, you know, the red tape that comes with that to not try and slow down and make things slower for staff, but still making sure we're getting that legal review that is appropriate. And we continue to work on that. And in addition, over the last several months, we've identified some updates to city ordinance that probably need to be done, and some of those are going to take some significant amount of time. We have an employee committee that's reviewing through personnel policies right now, and once that becomes the management level, you know, the city attorney's office is going to be very crucial in helping review those policies, make sure our ordinances match, you know, those kinds of things. Although the assistant city attorney right now is one of the co-chairs of that committee specifically. So yes, there's still a significant workload, and if we get some of these policies going forward, that workload is going to get heavier, I think, going forward. But I think the way we have it staffed now is sufficient for the foreseeable future, as I see, even with the added workload.
Did I hear that correctly? So there's no budget talk of 2023. This is just visioning for what we'll do and try to do in 2024, or what was that comment?
No,
I guess?
no. What I anticipate, if you have questions on any of the department budgets.
Okay.
We can pull the department head up, ask for clarification, justification, or their point of view.
Okay, perfect.
Any other discussion or questions on the city attorney budget? Let's move on to the finance department. Any questions for the finance?
Can I just make one comment on this?
Sure.
So I've obviously requested a obscene amount of information trying to get caught up in. Jenna and David have been absolutely fantastic to work with. So kudos to them. It's always timely. Very good to work with.
Information technology is the next budget on the agenda. Any questions? If not, let's move on to the assessor. Go ahead, Harold.
I do want to make a note here that we'll probably have some savings in the assessor's office. Our assessor is going to be deployed on military leave again and will probably be out for almost the entirety of the next fiscal year. So I just wanted a heads up to council that we'll be running on a skeleton crew in the assessor's office here for the next little while. But and just for the public's sake, and I have the HR director preparing a memo to this effect to be on the record. But there are certain protections that come with military personnel that are serving in the military. And so we will continue to hold that spot until he gets back. And we look forward to him being back. It's just a little disheartening that it's this soon after we just got him back from his last deployment. But it's understandable. We'll continue to hold that and abide by federal requirements, and it's the right thing to do anyway. But I did want the council to be aware that it's unlikely that we'll spend that whole budget in the assessor's office.
Roscoe?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And a comment on this one, too. I mean, this is one of the leanest budgets in the entire government, actually. In the last 5 years, it's increased 13.5%, which is one of the lowest, actually, of all the departments. So obviously, that seems to be an extremely well-run department. Now that the assessor is going to be gone, does that mean there's no property value increases then for the foreseeable future? Or?
His staff is very capable and keep the ball rolling and make sure that we comply with state law with assessments.
I'll give you my cell phone, Roscoe. You can answer the calls on that one. Any other questions of the assessor budget? If not, let's move on to police. Any questions, Roscoe?
Thank you. And obviously, we've hit on this a few times. I guess what I'm looking for, and I'm not trying to create the department head wants this, the city manager recommended this, so now now it's going to be a problem. I respect both people's opinions. So to me, I would like to hear what are the positions that weren't funded that maybe you would want funded. And again, not trying to create a riff here, so then you're going above your subordinate, so to speak. But to me, that's important too. And obviously, the discussion we had about the two the other day got a little heated. There's nobody here that doesn't want all those positions funded. Heck, we want more. The fact of the matter is we can't, filled. We can't fill them, unfortunately. So is there other areas that maybe would be easier if we fund those, take 2 or 3 or 4 of the police officer positions out, funded civilian, and therefore, in effect, increase the number of boots on the ground, so to speak?
Chief, do you want to come up and address?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Striley, I guess, in my opinion, I was satisfied with the city manager's proposed budget. I'm fairly confident. I just made 2 offers this past week. We have 6 openings. I'm fairly confident we can do that in December, or at least get very close. So I guess obviously I put all the positions in there I have a plan for the department, and every position that's approved gets us closer to that plan. So I guess I don't have a good answer. Of course, we can potentially hire civilians to replace the officers in some of those positions, and put existing personnel on the street. So there's a lot of potential there. It's just a matter of which way we want to go. But you know, I was satisfied even getting the one position additional to add to the task force. And that, I guess, I was satisfied the way it was.
Okay.
Easy answer.
And you know, some of the comments about, you know, cutting back, et cetera, I'd like to point out this budget, since in the last 5 years, has increased 31.4%. So there's been significant resources allocated to this budget every year, actually. So, and there was 93 positions, and there's 96 in the proposed. So there's a few positions up, so naturally there's going to be a little bit more money. But this, you know, there's never enough money. I get it, right? But to me, that of all the departments, there has been significant resources put into police and fire. Fire, for example, is up almost 30%. So,
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Lisa.
I'm not exactly sure if this is a question for the chief or maybe it's for Mr. Lakefield, but kind of segueing off the conversation that we had at our last meeting. Is it possible in a budget to take the dollar amount that President Pittner had suggested that we take from the positions and put into a savings account? Is it possible to allocate those same dollars, but if the chief can hire those positions, the amount into the savings account is less? And if he isn't able to fill those positions, the entire amount goes into the savings for the building? Is that possible in a budget? I'm trying to be the appeaser.
You wanna
here, if
phone a
can't
friend?
tell, but
I'm gonna step aside for that one. Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Olson, it is. And ultimately, when those dollars that are budgeted, if they aren't expended, they ended up in the general fund balance at the end of the year. Even when we've got in this process of budgeting for large purchases over a series of years where we set money aside, that money is in the fund balance and it is there like a savings account, like you referenced. We then have to appropriate that money in a future budget to be able to spend it. So the way the rules work is if we budget that money this year and it's not spent or under contract, we are not able to encumber it, and that appropriation will lapse. So then it has to be reappropriated in a future year.
so if I can continue, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So it would not be earmarked for the police department, it would go into the general fund. Could the intention be that, I mean, I guess, like I'm probably answering your answer, but you would just bring it to us again and say, would you allocate this money towards police department building fund? Is that what the question would come from you?
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Olson, and we track that, so we do keep track of what is there that has been set aside for that purpose, but it does have to be reappropriated in a future budget year.
Okay, thank you. I know we're not making motions tonight, I'm just trying to think ahead a little bit, so anyway, thank you.
and Mr. Mayor,
Steve,
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead, Steve.
Thanks. Just to make sure I understand this, so if we left those positions in there which are currently not filled and hopefully will be filled by the end of the year, and they didn't get filled, we could use that money if we made a separate appropriation for it, took a separate action, we could use that money for, say, a facilities study or whatever. It isn't earmarked specifically for police, but we could transfer it to where we wanted to.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, that's my understanding, yes.
I think the authority's coming up to the microphone here.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Padragula, that is correct. It does have to be appropriated. It is not a committed funds at that point. It could be spent for essentially any purpose in the future.
Thank you. And I guess I wanted to ask John what the current status is of our facilities review. I know we had split into 2 budget years, the funding for it, but how close are you to being able to ask for this?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pajagula, I'm hoping to have the RFP posted by the end of this week. I was hoping to have it done last week, but I was at a conference.
That sounds very good.
And then, Mr. Mayor, just, thank you. Comment, and I don't want to get into it today, but I think there has to be a fairly lengthy discussion on this salary survey too. But I will point this out because this is something I think every department head should get. If you get the master listing of what it's proposed, unfortunately, a lot of the police officer positions are at 2.5% for next year. Well, that's not good. And, I mean, that's not a great raise if you think about it. So the areas we're having problems hiring in this proposal, this salary survey, which I think is absolutely deeply flawed, a lot of the positions are at the minimum. And then you get to the top of this where there's the market adjustments, and like I said, we can get into it. It's significant raises. So I think the survey is actually hindering you too, your ability to. And like I said, we can get into the discussion on that. But I think that's something that all the department heads should look at. Just ask Lisa to send over a listing of your positions and what the proposed raise is on them. And I think you'll find that may be part of the problem.
I don't know if that was a question, but thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you.
Any other questions before we move on?
I forgot, I found.
Go ahead, Carrie.
It's a city council question. Harold, what in 2023, our consultant line is going up 25,000. What is that for?
If I remember correctly, I think that's for the community survey. It's to
Oh.
do the community survey again, so we can measure statistics compared to the last community survey result and reassess the priorities and then see if we've made any movement on the priorities that were identified last time.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Nothing else? We can move on to municipal judge. Any questions there? If not, moving on to fire control, fire. Any questions? If not, go ahead.
Chief, could you come, remember there is sort of chatter in the community about that issue you addressed fine for me about a misrecollection that the new fire station wasn't going to need any new staff. And so I would just like for you to clear that up and, explain, sort of how you did to me, just so everybody, can be on the same page and understand that it wasn't like a bait and switch. And, this has always been on the table.
Sure. Mayor Ross, Alderman Evans. The question that was posed by Alderman Evans is if we had to hire staff for Station 5, and we've always had to hire staff for Station 5. We are going to be hiring 3, and the reason we can do that is a few years ago when we had our retention issue, we reorganized the department and we took our rescue trucks offline. That means we put the staff on engines. That means we had a few extra staff and we kept them on, which actually allowed us to put enough staff on to meet 1710, the NFPA standard that we need for initial fire operations. So with that, we're able to shift 9 personnel over to Station 5. Initially, when we talked Station 5, we were going to need 12 people. That is a huge increase to our budget. I was posed to me how we could do it with less personnel so we'd be able to do it quicker, to get that staffing up there and get that station built. So that's kind of how it evolved. But we've always had to at least have 3. So.
And do you feel that is with the whole big picture in all 5 stations, 3 is going to be sufficient to have, it fully staffed and on the 2-day shifts and stuff. Because I'd hate to have this new station, kicking off and then, we're down a few or something.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Evans, it's going to work out good for us. We'll have a 4-person engine company there, and that's what is recommended through NFPA. So,
Great. Thank you.
yep.
Roscoe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question on the 55th. What's the capacity of that station? Is it fully staffed?
There is a 4-person, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, Alderman Striley. It is a fully staffed station. There is 4 people there. Again, going back to our standard for initial operations, right now we can meet it. We have 15 people that we can put on scene initially for a fire attack. Because our minimum staffing is 16, one has to stay at the airport at all times, so we can do 15. So that is essential to that. And I will actually be coming to this body in the fall and bringing some data, and you can see I have some great mapping and where our calls are at and everything, and everything's covered pretty well for now. But I'm going to show you what the future holds for us.
Okay, and then just one more on just, into the weeds, but what's the theory behind sending the truck out and not having any rescue vehicles versus just every time sending a truck? I mean, there's obviously pluses and minuses, I would assume. I'm not in that business, so I don't know.
Mayor Ross, Alderman Striley. Well, it's a toolbox. It has a full company. It has their leadership on it. When we were having high turnover, we didn't have enough people with the right credentials. They didn't have EMT, which is the basics. We were sending out a 1-year employee with a 6-month employee, going on calls, having to make decisions, and they really did need the leadership. With a full engine company, there's just that team approach. We have trained drivers that have gone through the driving piece of it that are driving. They have firefighters as well as their captain there. So it's just essentially a toolbox. It's a different toolbox, but they have everything there. If you show up on a fire scene with a rescue truck, you don't have any water. You're kind of stuck until that truck gets there to help you out. So.
Thank you.
Anything? Lisa?
Thank you. I'm going back a few years trying to remember the approximate number to how much it costs to train a firefighter before they're able to be fully functioning in the department. And I kind of remember it was around $75,000. Am I right? Okay. Okay. So just, as we move forward with this budget, just curious if we lose employees, we make a $75,000 investment. We have $75,000 walk out the door, and we pay another $75,000 for the new employee to come in.
Mayor Ross, Alderman Olson, it's not only a training, but all the equipment that goes with him. I mean, it's customized equipment, and those are very expensive. It's a time commitment for our personnel to be able to, work with them and bring them up to speed, and it just kind of puts us off. Like any operation, you're just not at your top capacity when you're losing people.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Nothing else, we can move on to community development. Any questions on the community development budget? Nothing? Let's move on to engineering. Any questions on the engineering budget? Roscoe?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I would like just justification on, the way I look at it, and take it for what it's worth, but the way I look at it is, these aren't one-year decisions. So, it's easy to say, well, we're going to be busy next year, so let's add 2 staff. No big deal. It's a couple $100,000. Well, I look at these as $4 or $5 million decisions because they're 40, 50-year job. Once it's in, you're never taking it out, generally. Although there was a couple taken out the other day, but that made sense. So I don't look at these as, well, it's only 60,000, so what's the big deal? You got to look, in my mind, further out. And once it's there, it ain't coming out. And then you got the perpetual, rise in salary and benefit expense, which is significant for the city. So and I couldn't be happier with the work that's been done around the city this year, actually. It has been unbelievable. The contractors have been good. Traffic flow has been fantastic. There's been very noticeable work done this year, I think. And next year it's proposed even more. So I get that there's more workload there, but to add two more staff, to me, like I won't support that, but it is what it is, I guess, if it passes, but I won't support adding it because I just think, yes, if you do a private firm contract job, you're going to pay a fee, of course, and it's going to be, I know what you're going to say though, it's going to be, well, it's going to be more than I'm proposing. But what I'm looking at is, like I said, it's not a 1 year, this isn't a 1 year decision. This is a permanent decision, very likely. So just kind of your comments on if there is $2 more million put in, and I'd like to put more than $2 million actually in the road in the increase for 2023, like how does that equate to 2 more positions?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor and Alderman Striley, when we put our budget together, we looked at that exact same thing because we all know that there's consulting engineers out there that can do this sort of work. But when you look at cities that have engineering departments, these sort of projects, these mill and overlays, sidewalk improvements, chip seals, these are bread and butter type of projects that our staff can do no problem. They don't need a specialized person that has a master's degree in wastewater engineering. This is, I don't want to say it's simple stuff, but it's stuff that a graduate engineer can do, no problem. When you look at what we have in front of us for the next at least 15 years based on our pavement management plan, which Alderman Striley, you weren't at our budget tour, but we can get you that information. You know, we have a significant pavement backlog, one that, you know, we could spend a lot of money and try to get rid of in 10 years, but that's probably not feasible. So what we try to do is spread that over a 15-year time frame, but at the end of 15 years, we made significant progress in our backlog, but we still have some. So we know that over time, we're going to need staff to attack this problem that we have in our street maintenance. This is at least a 15-year project. So the way that we approach this is if we hire staff, we've hired them for essentially a half of a career here at the city of Minot to do this sort of work. Now, as our city continues to grow, if we've done what we're supposed to do correctly, by the time we get done with the majority of the backlog, the city would be large enough where this position would be working on many other things that come up. Our infrastructure is aging. It's not just streets, it's utilities, it's everything that we do at the engineering department. And the nice thing about what we're asking for is we're asking for a permanent project civil engineer, which is like an entry-level engineering position. And then a technician, which is, you know, essentially what we're looking for is someone that has construction experience that can help us come in. They can do sidewalk inspections, right-of-way enforcement, and those sort of things, which frees up one of my engineers. So right now, we're out paving, and if someone calls in and wants a sidewalk inspection, I can't tell them, well, you know, sorry, it's going to have to be tomorrow. I have to pull an engineer today off of a project. We might have a $250,000 pave going down for them to go out and do sidewalk inspections and try to come back. So really what we're getting is 3 full-time equivalents for the price of 2. And we're confident that with that staffing level, not only can we handle the $2 million increase or potentially another $500,000, but that should be able to get us more value in the future as we hopefully continue to expand that street improvement cost. So you look at consulting firms and what they charge, a grad to mid-level engineer, depending on the firm, is about $160 to $185 an hour. Our rate for probably one of our top-end engineers that's been here a while, plus benefits, is around $60. So not only are we saving dollars, we're using our staff time to design these projects. We don't have to take those street improvement funds and pay an engineer. But then once I pay that engineer, they're done. I don't get any more value from them. Where if I have staff in-house, I guarantee you there's always something to do, always something to design, always something to inspect.
That's just part of our being on city staff and an engineering department. There's never a shortage of work. So I can appreciate your comments, Alderman Striley, but we feel confident that these people have plenty of work to do for a long time.
Perfect. No, and that's exactly what I want to hear. I mean, that makes sense. Not 100% I'll support it still, but I mean, at least you provided solid justification. There's obviously a lot of need. The number one complaint I hear from everybody's roads, and it's been a heck of an improvement this year. Going forward, I think your plan looks great. You know, this budget, I will point out, on the net budget in the last 5 years, there's four new employees, so 40% increase in the staff, and 67.5% increase on the budget excluding the capital. So I mean, the city's investing a significant amount of money in engineering, developing, and then putting the plan together and executing it. And I think that's good, because the primary job, I think, of the city, other than police and fire, is infrastructure. So I think in this case, we're definitely putting the dollars in the right spot.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Ross, just one quick thing for context in your numbers. That's correct. The number has gone up quite a bit, but two of my positions in the engineering department are actually funded with enterprise funds. So one of my engineers is funded through the stormwater program. They handle our community rating system and our stormwater compliance, or MS4 program with the state that's required. And then our GIS technician is funded through water and sewer, and they're essentially responsible for trying to get all of our infrastructure on the map so that we're compliant with the EPA lead and copper rule that's coming out. So, and then what ends up happening is the way that when we do studies, those dollars come into our department, so you'll have these peaks and valleys that come up. And I don't really have control over that, but that's where they have to put the money when we do certain projects. So when you see that number, that's kind of what's going on there.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And then since you brought it up on the tech, and I have asked Dan this question too, and I don't think you like the question, but could you share techs with Dan?
I think our two techs are going to be doing completely different jobs. So our technician right now is planned to do right-of-way enforcement and sidewalk inspections. In Dan's department, they really need another person to help do their construction inspection full-time. They have so much pipe work out there, and that takes a little bit different level of inspection than what we do in engineering on our street side. We would request both those positions be funded, because we'll keep them very busy. If we have to take only one, I guess we'll figure out a way, but I don't think we'll get our level of service that we're asking for.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Harold?
If I can just follow up with a question. Lance, what has been the financial impact of the software upgrade you've been doing over the last few years, and what do you see that impact being for the next few years? Because I think in some of the numbers that Alderman Striley is looking at, we've done some significant investment in software improvements and putting those tools in place, and those can be fairly expensive, as I understand it. And so where are we at on an update with that?
Mr. City Manager, that's correct. So the consulting portion of these software packages, or at least the CityWorks project, has gone through my budget. The actual cost of the software itself is in the IT budget. What we're trying to do with our asset management program is, right now we're building it from the ground up. So we're going from a paper map type of city to GIS. That's kind of where we're at right now. The next level is using that data and creating asset management plans. So I'll give you an example. If there's 1,000 catch basins that are deteriorating out in the city of Minot, and we have no infrastructure data on them other than that they're there, how do you prioritize the replacement? So we all know that budgets are tight. We only have so much money to work with. So we need a way to get that condition information collected and put that on the asset, so then we can filter and prioritize where we're going to attack these infrastructure problems. So when our public works staff goes out and does infrastructure maintenance, they're recording costs that they have incurred against these assets. So over time, you start building a history of which assets are giving us the most problems, and those are the ones you prioritize for replacement, so that we can maximize the dollars that we're given, and we're doing this the right way. So I think right now we're just starting to get into things. This is really the first year we've started to use it. Most of our departments are online. We're kind of in the final stretch, if you will, of our permitting, land development and licensing suite. So if you come in for a right-of-way permit, or you come in for an alcohol license or whatnot, eventually you'll be using this online portal, pay with a credit card, submit all your stuff online, et cetera. So it's going to be a really helpful tool for us, but it's taken a long time to get there because it's a massive project.
And then just one more final point on that, on the salary piece, and this is where the everything compounds quickly. It's 47% and 64% on the benefit side. So, you know, I get what you're saying about excluding, but I mean, those numbers are significant too. And maybe that's good because we've made progress doing more work. It's worth the investment. You net that out the savings, maybe it's significantly more than that, outsourcing it.
Thank you, Roscoe. Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Moving on to Public Works. Any questions of the Public Works budget? Roscoe.
Thank you. Just on the light operator, heavy operator, like I personally don't support those. But what is changing January 1 versus now, I guess is my question, as far as what's going to change from now until January 1 that there's a bunch more positions needed in these categories. Now, and I know we talked about the parking ramp stuff in the maintenance for the new city hall in that piece, but these positions are, you know, I don't quite understand what's going to change during the next 3-4 months that many more are needed, I guess.
Dan.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Straley, basically the LEO positions are in the storm sewer department. As you may know, basically the storm sewer department and our street department have been absorbing all of the cost and the workload with the new flood protection, the maintenance. There's a large investment out there, and that needs to be kept up. It needs to be maintained. You know, we're adding pump stations. Broadway Pump Station, the largest stormwater pump station in the state, takes maintenance. You have to be able to clean it. Right now, our storm sewer department works both storm sewer and street. They aren't designated storm sewer department. We've been lacking that for a long time on being able to get out there, assess our infrastructure that we're talking about, not only the old infrastructure that we have to see what condition it is for our repairs and our asset management, but also jetting it, cleaning it. Our staff has made quite a bit of progress in that because I have dedicated a foreman in that department and 2 people in the summer just to the storm sewer. Like I said, we're taking on additional stormwater pump stations that are flood related, all the levee inspections, all the flood wall inspections, the closures that have to be installed, all of that maintenance. The heavy equipment operators in the street department and the light equipment operators in the storm sewer department basically are the equivalent to the amount of work that I guess is subsidized by the 2 different departments. You know, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that those 2 heavy equipment operators are going to be 100% doing flood control work, but in the summertime, they will be working on the levees, mowing the levees, running the heavier equipment that it takes to mow the levees, do the inspection. In the wintertime, they will be able to assist and improve our snow removal. You know, it seems like every time we have a storm, there's somebody sick or can't get into work or something, you know, we'll have the workers to get them out there. And if we have everybody in, then we can get it done quicker. We can get to the alleys quicker and get them done. We can get to the sidewalks. You know, that's one of the complaints that we've heard for years is, you know, sidewalks are last on the list. Transportation is the first thing and then sidewalks, so we can get to them. But basically, by my estimate, there's about $450,000 worth of, I guess, flood control related work, maintenance, that is being absorbed between the street and the storm sewer department. And that is more than the 2 heavy equipment operators and the light equipment operators.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. And then so the way I've been reading, there's no, unless I missed it, there's no global fleet management right now. For vehicles, it's just kind of, well, whenever a department needs a vehicle, they buy it. Is that something you could take on? If there was a fleet manager position, and then that person would be in charge of checking out who's got the vehicles. Because to me, unless I'm missing something, is there a checks and balances here? Are the right? I mean, obviously, some of your people need to take them home for sure. Police and fire, likely for sure. But is that something your department could take over if that position were to be reallocated or created?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Striley, we've actually been looking at this. We think that we can take our shop foreman position, probably elevate that to a superintendent level position and make that more of a global fleet management shop supervisor. It's something that, I intended to look at over the next year. There's a lot of things that go into it. We've had discussions with Bismarck, and getting into a good fleet management program is expensive. There's a lot of upfront costs to set that capital away for the replacement of the vehicles, and so that everything's being replaced in a timely manner. But yeah, I think it's something that can be looked at, and we can take it on in the Public Works and come up with something by hopefully next year.
It's interesting you bring up Bismarck. I was actually reading their budget this morning, City of Bismarck's budget, and it's a decent sized number. I'm assuming theirs is kind of molded after the states. The states is very, obviously huge. But to me, a little bit more checks and balances on the fleet, who's driving, who's not. Is it appropriate? Is it not? Not saying there is any, but to me, that should be something maybe that should looked at, and Public Works obviously seem to be the right place for it.
Thank you, Roscoe. Harold?
To follow up on that, there is the fleet management side of it, but then as Dan alluded to, there's also the financial side of it. And we talked back in the spring during the strategic planning session with the council about the need to create a vehicle equipment replacement fund. This is a type of approach that I've used in other communities that I've served in. And what that does is that helps you, again, plan for rotation and replacement of vehicles and major capital investment equipment on a regular basis. And that we can plan for that financially, set money aside each year. So instead of every department coming and asking, well, I need to replace these vehicles this year or these vehicles next year, all that's incorporated into the plan. There's funding tied to it. Typically, most of the communities I've been in, there's a committee that helps oversee the vehicle equipment replacement fund. So all departments that need vehicles and operate vehicles have representation there at the table, and then they help make sure that that the equipment being replaced in any budget year is adapted. So if you have vehicles that are performing well and have been maintained well, and you can still get a couple more years out of them, just because it's at year 10 and it's supposed to be replaced at year 10, maybe we take that savings and we operate it for another year or two. And then vice versa, if we have a vehicle that's planned to be there for 10 years and at year 7 we're already having significant maintenance issues and costs, maybe that one gets replaced a little bit early. And so we are looking at these types of concepts, and these are things that once we get the budget done, staff and I will be working together more significantly to try and put these pieces in place. But Alderman Striley, you are correct that a good fleet maintenance plan also needs to go in conjunction with that. But I think you need to stand up the fleet maintenance plan as well as the VERF, the Vehicle Replacement Fund, simultaneously to make that function at its highest efficiency.
Thank you, Harold. Any other questions? Lisa first.
Yeah, thank you. So can you give us a little more information on the maintenance position that could potentially be cut? Following President Pittner's recommendation. You alluded to it a little bit at our last meeting, but can you give us more information related to that position?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Olson. Basically, last year we'd asked for 3 positions, a senior and 2 entry-level positions. We had the one senior one put on there. Property maintenance we have 6 people now if we fill this position, or 7 with this position that's open, advertised now. We maintain over 45 buildings, over 380,000 square feet, and we're taking on, we've taken on some, I guess, of the additional duties at the Carnegie, getting that fixed up to a little better standards, I guess, than it was being kept in. And, we have the new city hall coming on. That's 42,000 square feet. And, you don't just clean the whole thing with one person. When PSAP's in there, they have to have 6 days a week, 7 days a week cleaning in there. So it takes more than one person. We've taken on the parking garages. That's been a tremendous load because there are a lot of things that needed, I guess, a lot of tender loving care and continue to have tender loving care between the pigeon issues and, some of the workmanship when it was constructed that have the attention all the time and heaters and things like that. Our staff works on just about every building in the city in one way, shape, or form. We don't do the cleaning on all of them. Fire department's a good example of that. But, we're the ones that they call when the air conditioning doesn't work, the heating system doesn't work. No matter what time of day it is, we get the calls. So with Fire Station 5 coming on, that's going to be, another one that they're going to need to assist with. They work on if there's a toilet that's leaking or broken or a faucet that's leaking or broken, they're called on to do that. So with all of this additional work, we need the 2 extra people that are in the budget. If we don't, like I said, I think it would be I guess I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say, I think you need to set some money aside somewhere else for either helping maintain or hiring electricians or contractors or somebody to take care of all the calls for the heating and cooling and electrical and light switch fixes and light changes and some of the cleaning services. I got an estimate, just a rough estimate from one of the firms in town, the only one in town that does commercial cleaning, to do 5-day-a-week cleaning at the new city hall. It's about $85,000 a year. That's basic cleaning services. That's not having somebody around all day long to, take care of, there's a toilet overflowing or, my windows are dirty, they need to be cleaned or something like that. So, like I said, if you choose to cut one, I've dealt with it before, we'll deal with it again. But I'm just telling you, I think you're going to incur much more costs than what this one person with benefits and the benefit of that person is going to provide to the city, even along the long term. Even if you get rid of the parking garages, there's still a lot of things to do, a lot of things to maintain. And, like I said, if you hire those cleaning service, they're not going to come and clean the snow on the sidewalks, around the parking ramps, or around City Hall, or the existing City Hall. We're still going to be maintaining this facility, too. So it's not like I can take the people from here and shift them over there. So that was my reasoning.
All right, and I appreciate that answer because I think the assumption for maybe some people is that it's simply custodial, but it's much more.
Yes,
So
it's much
I
more.
appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Dan. Carrie?
So what, in the charges for sewer, the fees are going to be raised for commercial, residential, and government. The city manager said in his presentation that we're sort of that's not the full cost even. So why aren't we increasing fees for industrial users? Do you know? Why wasn't that on the table?
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, we don't have any industrial users at this time, so It really doesn't make any sense. We haven't had an
Okay.
industrial user for a few years since, I can't think of the facility down there.
Cloverdale?
You don't need to, that
Cloverdale.
makes sense. That-
Cloverdale,
yeah.
thank you, Mr. Mayor, left town. So that's why there's no increase in industrial.
And then all the departments that have generated revenue, including yours, who projected in some part of their 2023 a decrease in their revenues, also adjusted their expenditures, not necessarily dollar for dollar, but have adjusted them downward, with the exception of water, sewer, and storm. Is there a reason for that?
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, I'm not sure I'm completely following you. You know, we've had cash reserves in water and sewer that I guess has been more than our expenses, so that has helped in the past. Our sewer, you know, based on the study that was done, hasn't been meeting the income and the set aside and everything. So that's why we're recommending raising the sanitary sewer rate. Incremental, there'll be a small rate increase this year and probably an additional increase next year instead of putting it all up in 1 year and hitting the citizens all at one time. Storm sewer, based on our expenses for operations, we have two different storm sewer fees. There's a development fee and a maintenance fee. So the maintenance fee, based on the number of users we have, a monthly fee that we charge was short of meeting the revenue or the expenses. So we proposed increasing that. We could cut expenses, but that means you're going to be doing less storm sewer repair work, and we are way behind on that the way it is. You know, for years, we've been putting $100,000 or $150,000 towards it. I now have it up to about $750,000. That's probably a fourth of what it should be. So, like I said, we're raising the rates to cover the expenses and the required set aside by ordinance, you know, have 90 days operations in reserves and things like that.
And then so last year we moved a part-time up to full-time, right, for a bus driver? There was a shop clerk, bus driver.
Yes, our parts clerk / bus driver, yeah.
And
it
so
went from part-time
the
to
one for
full-time.
2023, is that, give us an update on the southwest route that is anticipated for the hospital, and if this is tied to that.
So, Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, the two new drivers that are in the budget would be for the additional routes that we're adding. One will be down towards the Trinity Hospital and that development in that area. The other one will be up towards the Ramstead School in northwest Minot and provide additional coverage up there. You know, we only go up to about 21st Avenue now. So with these additional routes, we can expand and reach more people, provide more rides by adding these two routes.
And when do you expect to roll out those additional routes?
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, it's probably going to be late spring, early summer before it comes on. You know, we'd want to have it, I guess, in place and operating for sure when Trinity has the doors open there.
And do we have enough buses for these new routes?
Yes.
Okay, good. I mean, I know they won't last forever, but, you know, adding two new routes is, you know, a big deal.
Ask me again next year. and
Yeah,
I
no,
might-
I mean, I expect additional buses in our fleet will be in the future for us, but just
have-
not this year.
We have some in the future for replacement.
That's all I have for Dan.
Thank you. Harry. Anything else? Public Works? Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Moving on to the airport budget. Any questions for clarification for the airport budget? If not, we'll move on to the library budget. Any questions?
So I'm on the library board, so I need to talk about this. So one of the things the library board, as you know, the board oversees the library. And the budget we approved is different than the one that is sort of proceeding forward. One of the changes was the board had approved a full-time library assistant, and that position was removed, and as well as an assistant director. So I am hoping Ms. Anderson can come up and just talk to council about the, you know, I can speak from the board's behalf, but you sold us on it, and so I'd like for you to reiterate sort of the importance of those and what it would cost.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Alderwoman Evans. The original request I had to my library board was actually for an assistant director, a additional full-time library assistant, and a full-time administrative assistant. The library board agreed to forward the change in the 2 part-time to full-time, and to not add a full-time assistant director. Once I had discussions with Harold and Dave, we decided at the time that we were not able to increase those 2 part-time positions. Since then, however, the cost of health insurance has decreased drastically enough from what we had originally budgeted that I can keep a full-time administrative assistant in my budget with benefits and not have any change to the budget that was either approved by the library board or submitted by the city manager. So my request is to add a full-time administrative assistant to my current budget.
And tell us why that position is needed for the current structure and operations of the library.
Thank you, Mayor Ross and Alderwoman Evans. I believe I'm one of the few, if not the only department of 24. My department includes 24 employees that does not have a full-time admin assistant. So because of that, you are paying a professional person, me, to often do billing, accounts receivable, payroll. All the onboarding for my employees is gone through me. So by adding a full-time administrative assistant, that frees me up to do additional work to increase the library's reach. For instance, I have 2 grants that are due on Tuesday that I may not be able to get done because I had to do payroll last week, so now I'm behind on everything. So by adding an additional, it's 15 hours for a person who's currently doing 25 hours a week, and an additional health insurance coverage plus other benefits, that will free me up to do a lot more good for our library.
And the cost of that would be about between 29 and 30,000?
Yes, it'll be under 30,000. The last calculation I have, I believe, is $29,041 to increase that person from part-time to full-time, including their health insurance.
Thank you. I just wanted you to be able to share that with everyone.
Any other questions? Harold?
Just a, not necessarily a question for Janet, but point of clarification here maybe, and this isn't a discussion to decide today, but maybe something that we need to talk about in the future. The library is kind of a little bit different of a position than the rest of the departments in the city in the fact that, technically speaking, the library director doesn't report to the city manager. She has her own board. She makes recommendations to her board. They approve her budget. I think there should be some consideration in the future that the library budget be handled separately from the city manager's recommended budget. I think that should come directly from the library and the board directly to the council. Now it's paid for with property tax and sales tax, so it impacts our budget. So there is some need there, but ultimately, the way I understand it is, and the reason why this was trimmed a little bit through my recommended budget is because we had a direction from council to try and minimize property tax increase in order to do what the library was asking. That was going to require an increase in the mill levy on the property tax side to be able to do that. I think that should be considered separately on its own merit by the council on whether or not you feel that's appropriate or not, rather than going through the very formal process of the city manager's recommended budget on our side. I think they do their own work. I think they do a good job. I think they need to request that separately, in my opinion. The only question I would ask is maybe Dave can come up and talk a little bit too, because my one concern on the finances for the library is this is our one department that is struggling with regards to reserves, and we need to come up with a solution to get them caught up with regards to their reserves, and maybe Dave can speak better to that.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, by city ordinance, all funds in the city are required to maintain a 1/12 reserve of their operating budget. Several years ago, and that ordinance has been in place for quite some time. So several years ago, it was put into place, and the practice was to maintain a 3/12 reserve in each of those funds, just to ensure that we had adequate funding on hand should something take place. And we've seen where that in the last few years, when things like COVID come into play, and we made a number of adjustments in middle of the budget year because the revenue picture was uncertain, that it's important to have those reserves to fall back on so we can continue the business of the city. The library currently has its 1/12 reserve that is required by statute, but they do not have enough funds in reserve to meet the 3/12 practice that we have in place. So that is something that we need to address going forward to ensure that they have the required reserves on hand. And as the budget continues to grow over time, which is the natural progression, that reserve amount increases as well, because it's a percentage of the operating budget.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Roscoe.
thank you. What is that? What's the shortfall? Rough estimate.
I don't have the number right in front of me. I can get it for you in just a matter of a minute,
worries.
though.
Because there is some large items in this budget, not going line by line, but I mean, if you want, just kind of curious, structural and maintenance, that's a almost an 80% increase. Part-time and temp is a 39% increase. So again, I don't want to get into the line by line, but just if some of those equal out.
And if I may, there are two major projects for the library that are in the budget this year. One was the replacement and fixing of the parking lot, which was delayed this year. It was planned to be done this fiscal year, but due to the retaining wall project and the lack of parking around the area, Janet graciously agreed to delay that project. So those numbers are reallocated in this year's budget. And then the other significant project is the remodel of the children's library section, which is very substantial. And again, both of those projects, if I remember correctly, are being funded pretty substantially from sales tax, if not exclusively from sales tax revenues.
You, Harold. Anything else? Thanks, Dave. Thank you. Well, according to my schedule, that is, we've gone through all of them, all of the budgets, and I think our next opportunity to bring up any questions will be, what I would like is the next opportunity would be September 6th for question and answer. At this point, unless there's more, Dave?
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Striley, my comptroller got me the number here. For the library to meet the 3/12 reserve, they would need another $207,000 in their reserve fund.
Thank you, Dave.
And then, Mr. Mayor, just one question on is brought up on the payroll. Could we get an update on the digitizing of payroll? I just find it absolutely fascinating that that's not done. I know it's in the works. I know there's a failed project, but to me, that is like absolutely essential that gets done yesterday. I mean, it's a huge time waste for a lot of people, and it'd be nice to know what the update is on that. Is there more money that's needed? What can accelerate that to go 1/1/23 that's done?
Lisa.
Mr. Mayor and Alderman Striley, we are in the process of putting out an RFP for that project. We have also been meeting with several vendors to be proactive in looking at some of the different vendors. Currently, there is 50,000 in the budget. Our anticipation to go live for that would be the second quarter of next year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lisa, how do we accelerate that? I mean, we got a lot of months left in the year. It's not really a complicated process. Granted, there's 400 employees. I get it. Clock-in systems would have to be changed. I mean, there is some work to be done, obviously, but how do we accelerate that?
You have to do it on a quarterly basis, and the end of the year is not enough time. That's 3 months away. There's just no way with everything that we need to do to be able to put an entire process in place, including an RFP request in a 3-month period.
So for that, what's the threshold on it? Can't you just go out and pick a vendor if it's 50,000?
That's just the implementation costs. The annual maintenance fees are also something we would have to consider as part of the project.
Probably 20, 25 an employee per month. Is that kind of the number you're hearing?
We're looking probably at about $150,000 a year.
Yeah, that's about what I was thinking.
So that's got to be taken into consideration as well. We're over the threshold, so.
Thank you, Lisa. Carrie?
I don't know if this is for Dave or Harold, whoever. We downcast our revenue prediction for Hub City funding in 2023. Is that correct? And if so, what was that based on?
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, we actually have increased slightly our forecast for Hub City revenues. And this was brought to our attention by a constituent earlier in the week, and we had this discussion. Some of it shows up in the budget in general fund, and some of it is also budgeted directly in capital items. So when you look at those items put together, if you only look at the general fund line item, it looks like we cut that tremendously, and that's not the case.
Okay, thank you. That's
Your comments, questions?
Just one more comment, Mr. Mayor. You know, the people understand dollars. Nobody understands mills. Mills are a way to mask the issue, I think. So, you know, the talk of, well, it's only this mill, it's only that mill. It's really small. What are you worrying about? The actual increase in this budget on property taxes, when you include valuations, and you have to include valuations. You can't just say, well, it is what it is about 1.8 million. Or 6.41% increase in the city piece to sales, property tax. The general fund item on this, if you go 2022 over 2023, it's 17.42%. Now, obviously, you got to strip some out of that out. There's a $2 million increase in the sales tax projected, so there's numbers baked in there that you know where that goes. And unfortunately, generally, we haven't seen an increase in the population. Now, we want to hit 50,000, we want to hit 60, we want to hit 70, we want to keep growing, but we haven't seen that. And, you know, if you look at from 2018 to 2023 proposed budget, I mean, it's a 62% increase. That's a big number. So, I mean, I think we got to be cognizant of that. The average sale price in 2018 was $225,000 according to the assessor's report. This year through June, it's $255,000 for a home price. Taxable valuations are up 9.6% in that time frame. So to me, it's a little bit disconnected, not tremendously disconnected, but it's certainly disconnected. You look at the salary piece from 22 to 23, it's 8.02% increase. That's a big increase. A lot of positions, so obviously makes sense. The benefit piece, you have to net out now the healthcare savings, but 11%. So these are things, and bigger numbers as they go up every year, then obviously the inflationary thing increases. So to me, we got to be cognizant of this. You know, it's easy to say, well, the school's going way up, look at us. We didn't do that much comparatively. I think that's the wrong approach to look at. And I think getting that number closer to zero is a goal, not just, zero on the mills. The dollars you have to look at. in my own property tax statement, everybody's got them obviously recently. A large percentage, it was the school for sure. Mine is a 24% increase. Neighbor down the street, 16% increase. So, I mean, these are real dollars, real money. I think we have to think outside the box, be as aggressive as we can on the not raising where, sticking it to needs, not wants. And I think one of the bigger pieces is the benefit package, which I would like to change personally and to be more advantageous to the employee. Actually, it'd be a recruiting tool, I think. Right now, it's too expensive, and the employee's paying too much out of their pocket, in my opinion. We're at a competitive disadvantage there. And then into the salary survey, I mean, definitely want to talk about that, but not tonight. We can do it another time.
Thank you, Roscoe. Anything else? So at this,
So is your thought, Tom, to have, just go right next to our regular meeting, not have another working group where we now sort of have some of the clarifying information and stuff to sort of coalesce around how we want to move forward? I don't know. That's just sort of what I was thinking, just so we sort of see where, we're all at and,
well, I think this was an opportunity for everyone on the council to ask their questions for clarification, to come in as prepared as possible. And I know we had it split out into 3 meetings to where we were gonna, hopefully kind of separate those out. I think we accomplished everything tonight. It's my intention to entertain a motion to remove the other 2 special meetings. And if there are any other final questions, that they can be brought up in the question and answer session in our first meeting in September.
I would actually a meeting to just sort of now talk, not among each other. I mean, it's a public meeting, but really, does anybody else feel that need or?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Carrie. I agree with Tom. I think that can be accomplished. I think that still can be accomplished at the Q&A section. I think this was to, again, gather information, let department heads talk directly to council and have some dedicated time. And I think that can be accomplished. We talk about how many meetings we have already and special meetings we had probably last calendar year. I think we could remove those 2 meetings and keep it to the Q&A section. And even if that's extended out within that meeting, I think is still beneficial. So I'll make the motion, I guess, to eliminate the next 2 special meetings and maintain the Q&A section in our first meeting in September.
Second.
Moved by Paul, second by Lisa. Discussion. Roscoe?
Thank you. I'll support that. If we're not interested in going line by line, I think the budget process is flawed. I think it needs to be corrected in next year. Arguably it's too late now, but it is flawed in my opinion. The way it's done, there's not a lot of time in between, and it's just kind of expected. Well, we put the time and effort into it. You should just agree with it and pass it. I just fundamentally disagree with that. And I think there should be more engagement, and this is good that we're doing this tonight. I think this is a good step. All I care about is transparency and accountability. It's the taxpayers' money. It's not private money. So we have to be cognizant of that, and I appreciate holding this meeting. I think we accomplished a fair amount. Clarification on a few things. I think going forward in the Q&A stuff, I still want to talk about the salary piece. I think it's fundamentally unfair to some. I think it's egregious, actually, in some cases. So I would really like to talk about that, and then the benefit piece as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Lisa?
I would just add that, to Alderman Striley, being newer on the council, he didn't have the benefit of starting this process in May when the rest of us did. But we have been working on the budget, and we have been working with our city staff since early May. So I think that we do have an advantage. We have more information. However, all of those meetings were open meetings, and they were made public. And so anyone that wanted to attend them at that time certainly could have. We put in I think, between 30 and 40 hours attending those meetings. And so we got a lot of information that has helped us kind of digest some of this. So far, I'm satisfied with the process.
Just to provide my historical perspective, the process is very different than it was when I first joined the council in 1998, and it's markedly better. And one of the ways in which I think it's better is that the entire council has been involved earlier in the process. In the old days, I think it was pretty much kind of a done deal. It was kind of a setup in some ways. That's changed dramatically. As Lisa said, we've been involved in a very extensive series of meetings, going out, touring, visiting with the departments, seeing their equipment, talking with their staff, and not just department heads, but also supervisors and superintendents and even line staff. And I think we got a sense from them very early on in this process, which again, unfortunately, you weren't privy to, but the public was. We got a sense of what they needed and what they wanted. And I think they also, from us, got a sense of what was realistic and what wasn't. We had some fairly, I won't say heated, but fairly assertive discussions in terms of what made sense to us and what made sense to them. One of the positions we argued about, and in a positive sense of the word argue, was a public information officer position. And it was interesting to me that the police chief made his pitch and the council responded. And what's interesting too was that two of the alder members, the mayor and an alderman, the current mayor now, were both in the public information business. Both had been reporters, and they had a very good sense of what the public needed and what the media tried to convey and could and couldn't convey. And I think that's led to some significant adjustments in what has been recommended by the city manager in his budget, and it sounds like what we're moving toward. So I don't think this was by any means any rubber stamp process or a done deal. And I think that interchange, that dialogue between us as the representatives of the people and city staff started very early and was a very engaged and ongoing process. And we held our ground. It wasn't just give us this and, oh yeah, sure, we'll do it. I think we developed the budget together. We developed the budget in a very collaborative fashion. So I think what you're seeing here really is the result of many months' worth of work, obviously some very detailed proposals from city staff and the city manager and the finance director, but also involving us from a very, very early stage. It also was assisted by our recent retreat meetings where we tried to set up our own aspirations or identify our own aspirations and set some goals for the city. And I think the city manager's done a very good job of intuiting and writing down what we came up with, and I think that's been transmitted to city staff. So I see us working together, city council, city manager, department heads, and line staff, working very closely together now and coming up with this proposal. And that's part of the reason maybe we don't have the rubber stamping, which I don't think we have now, but we used to have in the past, in my opinion. And we also don't have maybe some of the acrimonious debates we used to have, because we've all already had input into this, and it's our budget, really. We have some ownership, at least I feel I do. So that's been a change. And again, if you join this process later on because of an election, you didn't have the benefit of that. But I can tell you from my perspective, someone who's been on and off the council for over 20 years, that this has been a very good process and a very different process and a much more productive process. And again, part of that is the transparency and the collaboration, the collegiality. It isn't the staff telling us what they need or want. It's us working together. And part of what we've brought into it is a sense of fiscal reality and a sense of trying to be accountable to the citizens in terms of fiscal responsibility. So I'm comfortable. I mean, there are obviously some things that I'm not keen on. I'd like to change. I think all of us have some of that. But I think it really, at this point, is pretty much a council budget. That's how I see it. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you, Steve. Paul?
And I just want to wrap up all those comments. I think I agree with all of them. I think I wasn't on the council in 1998. I think I was attending Perkett Elementary School. But the point being, I think it's come a long way. I think the budget used to be presented. Council members found it on the dais when they showed up, and they approved it maybe minutes later. And now we have a process that starts in the spring of budget tours and getting out and interacting with department heads. So I also agree with Alderman Striley that I think it can be better. I think we should always strive to make it better. And I think that will be the goal. That's my goal for next year. When I'm looking at addressing, the president's letter perspective of this, I'm pulling up PowerPoint presentations from March and April, and as good a notes as I try to take or be able to recall the memory, you lose some of that. So I think maybe even having somewhat of a condensed process, maybe having a preliminary budget presented to us, maybe there's and maybe this can be presented as some alternatives or some different options from leadership. If we had maybe a council retreat to discuss some of our goals for the year early on in the process, and then a preliminary budget presented to us, and then the budget workshop, so that department heads can show us, hey, this is what we asked for, this is what we're getting, this is what we're happy with, this is what we can do with it, as part of the tour process, and then we can really dig down into the Q&A sessions such as this. And I think this is a good exercise. I think it can be incorporated into the budget next year. We used to do it in the auditorium, and with really bad lighting and really uncomfortable chairs for a few hours, and everyone sat in a big round table, and you had to turn your mic off when somebody else wanted to speak. So I think this is a good format to do it in. And then after all those questions and answers, and we can all kind of get a feel for what all of the different aldermen feel about the budget, the president can take that message and incorporate it within their letter, and take a little slice of everyone's perspective. So again, I think there can be some rearranging. I think there can be improvements to the process, so that not only council members feel more involved, but also staff feel more involved, and we can just have a more educated and cordial experience throughout this. So I'm going to agree with everyone that I think it. I don't want to be complacent with the process that we have. I always want to try to make it better. So.
Thank you. Anything else? If not, call the roll.
Pittner,
Yes.
Quadrigula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Striley, Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is adjournment.
And I just have one comment before that.
Go ahead.
I just want to, I know I speak for all of us, thank city staff and department heads for obliging us. I mean, this has been, I think all of us up here take this work very seriously. The taxpayer money is sacred, and, we want to be able to use it in the most effective and have taxpayers get the most bang for their buck. And so I know it can be annoying at times, but it has been very helpful for us to be able to, have the transparency and the accountability to taxpayers, and you are helping us do that. So, we take up a lot of your evenings, but it is appreciated not only by those of us sitting up here, but the residents who know that, we are all committed to, doing this as efficiently and in the best way we can. So thank you all, and we'll try and not, you just got 2 nights off your calendar right now, so.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.